I'm your host, Reena Friedman Watts, and this is the Better Call Daddy Show.
Hey, this is Big Daddy, Wayne Friedman.
That's my grandpa. Grandpa, you ready for more daddy drama?
My dad is my number one hero and number one fan.
And I'm a pretty cool dude.
All right, season 4, baby, here we go.
More stories you're not going to believe.
And maybe you will after you listen.
5 stars.
5.5 stars, 2 thumbs up.
You are a pretty cool dude.
Love you, Mommy.
Don't stand on the table and damn the public. You'll get some words of wisdom to live by.
Here we go again. Better call Daddy.
You know what your problem is? You like me.
Yeah, I do. Each week, I interview a guest, share the stories with my dad, and then he weighs in at the end of every episode with his wisdom and wit.
Hey, Grandpa.
Everyone from influential players to inspirational fathers, and of course, controversial people.
Grandpa, my mommy's calling.
Creating that legacy one call at a time. And welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show.
Stay tuned.
Where's the music?
Better call Daddy cause he knows you best. Better call Daddy cause he's bringing the test. He sees possibilities. Better call Daddy, he'll be by your side. Better call Daddy, you're the apple of his eye. He sees possibilities. Oh, Julie.
Today's guest is an American actress, a screenwriter, and a podcaster out of Germany. It's a long story, and I got it. Welcome, Anne Alexander Cedar, to the Better Call Daddy Show.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
So I wanted to start with a subject that you have covered on your podcast, which is readiness. I think that
Oh, cool. Okay.
is super interesting. How and when do you know when you're ready to get out there to be an
You
actor?
don't. That's the thing. You don't. You just have to do it. And in the doing of it, you are going to gain your confidence. And you're also going to be gaining feedback, right?
Mm.
So if you're a beginning actor, you know, there's a lot of feedback. And probably because people are just at the start of their journey, they don't know necessarily how to read that feedback that they're getting. But if you're a more experienced actor, and trust me, I know a lot of experienced actors that hold themselves back by, but my show reel isn't, I'm just waiting for this, and I'm going to do a new send out, as soon as I get all that together, or my new headshots, and that. Just, you have to work with what you have. You can improve it, right? But just, it's like you can't edit a blank page, right? You have to write the damn thing down. And then you can make it better. And anything, I think, in life, it's not just acting. Anything in life is just take those first few steps and then look around and see where you are,
I think that definitely relates to podcasting. I think a lot of people have an idea or they've been successful at creating a newsletter or creating a community or an audience somewhere. And they're like, oh, I should have a podcast. And then it's, I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to market. I don't know how to do the technical elements, but you learn so much by just starting.
Just do it. Just do it. I'm always saying imperfect action. Just do it, right? I have to say the same thing because podcasting is I've only been doing it about almost a year now. YouTube, I started basically at the same time. I only had ever would upload my show reels or my son's videos to YouTube before, and now I'm trying to use it in a professional way. And these are monster mediums, right? There's so much to learn. And, I think what people underestimate is a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever you want to, however you want to approach that, it's a business. So you have to be doing all the things that you mentioned, right? And I look at, I have 45 episodes of my podcast. So I've definitely at least done 45 videos and I've cut up a lot of videos. So it looks like I've done a lot more because some of my videos run really long, like an hour and a half. But it's all a learning process, learning what works, learning what doesn't work, how to make the editing better, what tools to use. Like I use Descript. I don't know what you use. Giving a shout out on Descript here.
Yeah, I sometimes use Descript too.
Yeah.
But like you, I have a television background, so I use other fancy tools too.
Yeah. I'll also run it through DaVinci just for the color coding and exactly. And things like that. But what DaVinci doesn't have, DaVinci is obviously much better at editing, but you have to know what you're doing.
Right.
It's easier to edit with the script. You can cut out, if my husband were to walk in right now, we could just look at the transcript and cut that out. And it cuts it out for you, which is amazing. It's such a big help. And it has so much great B-roll and GIFs or GIFs, however people say that. And right. And, little things that you can add in that Da Vinci doesn't have. It may in the future, because everybody's going AI. So I'm sort of waiting to see what the new update brings. Then we'll see what I do from there.
I would love to take it back to kind of your film school days and what you learned from that and how that's tied into your career now.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in film school, it was like real literally that long ago, seemingly. We used to cut on this old machine, Steinbeck, I think was the name of it, where you actually had film, wasn't digital, using a razor blade to cut it and scotch tape to tape it together. That was editing back then, or at least that's what I was learning at NYU Tisch. I mean, so, and that was it. And if you were missing a tape and you look everywhere, it was probably under your foot somewhere, crumpled up. And then there was nothing you could do. It was what it was. So what that taught me as an actor were a couple of things, many things, but a couple of things that come to mind are, one is you are part of a whole. It's not I'm starring in the story of my life, right? And everybody else is, they're just supporting characters in the story of my life, right? But so many actors kind of approach whatever role they have in a film, in a television series, as they have to do all the work and that they are the main thing, right? But the director, the DOP, and the editor, these are major components of telling the story. And sometimes all you have to do is stand there. And if the camera pushes in on you slowly, the audience is going to understand something internal is happening because we're moving in on this person. So a lot of times you don't have to do nearly what you think you have to do. Especially, if you don't have a lot of experience in film, one thing is to just kind of be you, start with that. Don't try and be a character because it's going to look fake. Even styles of acting have changed from when I was learning acting. I mean, look back to Laurence Olivier, right? Who was the premier actor back, in the 40s, 50s, whatever that was, long time ago. Like when they were, in the silent era. So they had to be demonstrative because there was no voice, right? And then we got the talkies and people started talking. And there was a big uproar about that, which I think is super interesting because it kind of leads into the uproar. It was a revolution, right? It was a revolution in film and filmmaking. And people thought it was going to ruin, the art of filmmaking to have this distraction of having audio all of a sudden, as opposed to live music playing in the cue cards or whatever, not the cue cards, but the telling you, they would hold up these signs to tell you what was going on. And then, things slowly started to, I think the big revolution came like around the James Dean, Paul Newman, Marilyn Monroe. They were all studying acting in LA method. And that sort of birthed this whole new thing of being real. But even then, if you look back to those films of like James Dean, you can immerse yourself in that world and buy into it. But the first few 30 seconds are going to be a little bit jarring because they're more demonstrative. So as soon as you buy into that world, it's okay. And then you can lose yourself in it because the emotions are real, but they're still demonstrating to a certain extent. When you think about that scene with James Dean, you're tearing me apart, right? It's almost like a parody now. But at the time, it was revolutionary. We hadn't seen people like exposing their guts like that. They were just demonstrating what that was. And now I think it's super interesting with AI because AI is leading us, into a whole nother thing. And there are so many sides to this. And I hope humanity wins, obviously. I think that we are going to be seeing like really the rise of, we're already seeing it, niche content, people being attracted to podcasters and to YouTubers because they're real people, not because everything's perfect and they're on a perfect set. And now AI is starting to be able to recreate people.
It could make a whole different version of characters that you would play. You're like, here's the alter ego of Anne.
Yeah. Or the better version, right?
Or it could
The
even give you
prettier,
potential like
younger.
suggestions on characters and how you might play them better.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who knows? I mean, right now it's pretty crap. I don't know how much you've played around with it. I use AI every day,
I do too.
right? But yeah, for sure. But I also
It needs
use
improving.
It is improving, but you could never just let it write something on its own. I've realized, I was telling my son yesterday, I'm in a sadomasochistic relationship with AI and I'm the sadist. I'm like, you are so fucking stupid. I hope I can swear. But
Yeah.
literally, I just get so frustrated with this. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't meet your expectations. It's like, no, you did not. You know?
That's awesome. Yeah. Getting a bitch fight with Alexa.
I know. It's ChatGTP, which I'm sure is
That
male.
too.
I don't know.
It
Right.
doesn't write like I would write, but it's almost there. Yeah.
With a lot of, but I sometimes I think by the time I'm done whipping this thing into how I want it to be, I could have just written it myself, right? So the way I use it is much more as like a sounding board. It's like, okay, read this. Do not make any changes. This is what I always write in caps. Critique and suggest. That's all I ever say to it. And I say it again and again. Like sometimes it's like you're talking to an idiot, right? Because it's supposed to be a computer and it has access to everything. And within the chat, I'll be like, do you remember what I said in the second input? Yes, I do. Repeat it back to me. It's like, very good. Now remember that as your answer. You know, I'm getting upset just thinking about it.
That's hysterical. What do you give Chat GPT? Like social media posts or?
Everything, like really pretty much everything. There is an exercise that I'm working on with the course that I have, right? And one of it is trying to figure out your themes, right? The themes in your life that drive you, that you're drawn to, because that's going to lead, because a couple of reasons. One is your essence, right? Who you are is generally attracted to those themes because they resonate with you, right? It's something that it resonates with you. I don't know how to put it other than that.
Okay,
And
so like Daddy's Girls.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like name some of your favorite characters
Yeah,
that you like to watch or that I mean, you're not an actor.
or
So I
even
would say,
people that I like to interview. So I love to interview people that have worked in the arts or that are creatives.
okay. So
I
yeah, that's a theme
gravitate
in your
towards
life.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So we all have these. And as actors, if you don't tell the industry who you are, they are going to tell you who they think they are, who they think you are.
They'll typecast you.
They'll typecast you. So you can steer that. It can't be delusional, right? Some people are. You have to be aware, self-aware of what you bring to the table. But it's also difficult because we are so close to ourselves. So it's hard to get that outside perspective. So there's a lot of, actors do a lot of self-awareness work anyway. So this is even going beyond that. This is like going deep, deep, deep to try and figure out who the hell you are, why you do what you do, and why those things are important to you so that you can ultimately get better roles that fit you better and are more fulfilling.
Talk to me about what you found out about yourself.
I gravitate to strong women who are extremely ambitious and are torn between other people's expectations of them. So be that my son, my husband, society, those kind of things, right? So I think, and it's a theme in my writing as well.
Hi, that's
write,
me.
yeah. So as women, we are always, I think we're hardwired for the most part, not all of us, but I would say 90% of us are hardwired that once we have the kids, they come first. When the kids don't need you anymore, then what? Because you've dedicated all this time, your life, and you've done it. Thank God, right? My son is my everything. I love my husband, but my son is my everything. But I did my job because he doesn't need me anymore. And so thank God for that too. But it's like in the beginning, now it's 10 years later, my son is 26. But in the beginning, it was like, well, now what? I just spent 16 years dedicating my life to this kid, changing everything for this kid. And now what? Am I just supposed to keep going with these things that aren't? He was fulfilling me. That's what it was. He was fulfilling me, right? Being his mom was fulfilling me. It still does. But there's only so much momming you can do when they're adults, right? They need you, but not on the same level, not with the same intensity all the time. So when he didn't want to hang out with me anymore, little weirdo, got to get him in therapy. Then it was like, okay, actually, there is somebody in here, right? And I have my wants and desires. So this is a big theme for me. It's like separating the woman from the mother.
Oh, yeah.
And because the woman wants, I want a big life. I want my dreams. And I'm not just wanting them. I'm going about getting them. But the mom felt very guilty a lot, and I arranged my life in a way that I was always available to my son and my husband. And it was a huge transition for my husband, which made it very difficult for my son. I think my son was fine. Like he was 16. It's not like he wanted to hang out with me anyway. But my husband was having a really hard time with the transition. And my son, is an only child. So he's very in tune with both of us. And he was seeing how unhappy my husband was. And so that was coming back to me as well. Like, you're not being fair and, you're selfish and da, da, da. So that comes up for me too. And maybe I was, maybe I am, but I also have a life to live. And I love my husband. We're still together, spoiler. And he's very supportive now. It took a long time for him to come around.
That's interesting. Do you think there was any concerns of you working in Hollywood or working as an actor? Because would you ever do like love scenes or have to make out with a man or something like that? Is there concerns around that?
Probably I have, right? So yeah.
Ooh,
it's
I'm
there.
interested in that. Like, how does that work with being a mom and a wife? I feel like my husband wouldn't like that.
No, most men don't. Well, I don't rub it in his face. I mean, the first couple of times you do something like that, it's weird. But after you've done it a few times, it's just not that weird. I don't know. I mean, it's not, it's not to say that you don't find someone attractive or unattractive. There's that too, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Right? Yeah.
That must be
It's
harder.
It is much. It's not the same thing, right? Because it makes it easier if you like the person and you find them attractive. But I'm a grown up and I know that I'm not in love with this person. They are too, right? You do get used to it. It sounds weird, but you do get used to it.
Is
It
that
doesn't.
part of the uncomfortableness though with your husband or?
Interesting. That was never like talked about as a concern from his point. And he had seen me in a couple of plays where I had kissed somebody else. So he didn't like it. We talked about it, but he's like, okay. I mean, he knew it wasn't me. I mean, it was me, but it wasn't. My heart is right. I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird thing when your body is your instrument.
Ooh, yeah, that's
And
a
you're
good
letting
point.
someone else touch it, right?
Play
Use
it.
it. Play it. Exactly. It's a little weird. Yeah. So I get it. But that was not the main concern. I think the main concern was that I wasn't home so much. I wasn't available so much. And I
Yeah.
had other priorities. So I think probably that beyond everything else. Because before, where my son and my husband, my family had been my main priority and everything else centered around that. Now my career had become my priority. It was like, you're old enough, you can make your own dinner. I don't need to be here to do that for you. So things like that. And it was a shock for him, right? All of a sudden I'd been there for 16 years, very traditionally been there. And even though I was working the whole time, I was doing voice work and moderation. I don't know, you're familiar with that. So it's not a time intensive thing, right? And I had my son with me 90% of the time in the studios. And it was, a long day would be 4 hours and the money was great. He was very spoiled with that. And I don't think he could understand why I wanted something else.
Or something
he's not-
more.
Something more. Yeah. It was like, it's great what you do. You have all this free time, because he was looking at it from his perspective. And that's what he would have loved. Something where he could, because he didn't love his work. He doesn't love his work. He's an architect, but he doesn't love it. I think he chose his career path sort of randomly. He's been successful at it, but he's more of a general contractor. I think he would have been happier if he could have done more designing, but that's not how it worked out. There was more money and more opportunity in the general contracting end of it. So he oversees projects and things like that. So he couldn't understand how I could be so obsessive about my work, and if somebody can't understand, it's hard to explain it.
Yeah, I understand it because it's a calling.
Yeah.
When did you start like having the feeling that it was a calling? Like, can you talk about being drawn to it and
Oh,
how that
yeah.
evolved? Yeah.
I mean, the first time I ever acted, I was 10 years old at summer camp. That was just a lucky coincidence that I happened to be there and they cast me and, but it didn't mean anything to me in the process of getting the role. I had no idea what it meant to be on stage or what it meant to act, what it meant to be a part of something like that until I was doing it. But it wasn't even until opening night and I could see the people in silhouette and we were doing Oliver Twist. I don't know if you're familiar with Oliver Twist.
Yeah, cute.
Yeah. And I played Nancy, who's like the only female role, except there were a lot of pickpockets who were females, but they were in the chorus basically. Right. So I had a big role for the play. And it was while I was singing As Long as He Needs Me. And all of a sudden, I'm looking out at the audience and I'm kind of blinded by the stage lights. But so I'm seeing everyone in silhouette. And as I'm singing, I kind of got into this, like the flow state. And all of a sudden it was like, I felt like me and the audience were like one, like that we were connected. And I mean, I don't know how good I was. And maybe it was all in my head, who knows, but it happened. And it was like getting a hit of a drug or something, it was like, whoa, okay, what was that? I want more of that. And so it was always kind of chasing that. And then for a long time, I didn't think that acting was a viable choice. My dad was highly educated. So I had gone to Harvard and, was an entrepreneur. And my mom is also an entrepreneur. And so my parents were like, think outside of the box, but not that far, maybe, right? As far as being an actor. It just honestly didn't even occur to me until I was in my late teens. And that's when, 17, 18, around that time when I was thinking I wanted to do that more. And then my grandmother said, well, come to Chicago. And I was living in Detroit. So come to Chicago and figure it out. And that's what I did. For anybody who's listening, who's a beginner, be careful about who you learn from. Because I got into a studio. The studio was good. The training was good. But the instructor made his living off of teaching us. And so he was very loath to let us go. And there was a lot of brainwashing and mind fucking going on, like you're not ready, don't audition, those kind of things, which really messed with me for a long time. Yeah, until I kind of finally broke free of it. But I think I still carried a lot of those limiting beliefs with me for a while. And so be careful. Never don't get into a studio where they're not encouraging you to at least try an audition and get the feedback, because you're going to learn so much. If you get it, if you get booked, they're going to know you're inexperienced. So they're going to take that into consideration. And you're going to learn so much just doing it. So do and learn, right? Do both.
Did you ever feel self-conscious?
As an actor?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. In school, sure. There was a lot of it until I realized that I made more of a fool of myself trying to watch out for that, like trying to guard for that, than I did just letting go and saying, okay, this is it. But it's a process. It's all a process, right?
Yeah.
Like when I came back, I was 47. And so it's like, just like people they hear the sound of their voice for the first time and they hate it, right? So seeing yourself on film, the first few times, it's like, oh God, that's what I look like. Even have you ever reversed your image, just flipped a picture and looked at yourself? It's like, what? And that's how people are seeing you, right? But you see yourself in the mirror. So your image, that's how you see yourself, is actually reversed to how everybody else sees you. So if you flip that image, that's how the rest of the world is seeing you. And I always think I look terrible flipped. That's how people see me. It's like, oh my God, I hate that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
My son yesterday was like, Mom, I was searching for your podcast on YouTube and I came across all of the other shows that you've been on. And then I immediately felt a bit self-conscious, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about your son seeing you on screen? Is that uncomfortable ever?
No, not at all. I mean, but when I decided to come back to acting, right, after this 16-year break, and as I said, I was doing acting adjacent, but it wasn't really creative in the way that acting is creative. Like doing voiceover, it's fun, but it's not fulfilling. Does that make sense?
Well, you're capable of more.
Right.
More dimensions. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, all of it. And so when I decided, okay, I am going to give this another shot, the first thing I started looking around for were coaches so that I could start taking some workshops. And there weren't any. So I started bringing coaches into Munich. There were coaches here, but not in English. And my German wasn't good enough back then. So I wanted the training in the English. And I thought, okay, I need the training now and I'll worry about the language later. But I want the training now. So that's what I did. And I started every month. I brought in at least one coach from LA or from New York or from London or from Berlin. I was bringing in people from all over the place. And I was organizing these workshops so that it was affordable, right? Because I had to pay for their flight and their hotel and the room and all of it. And so I would organize the workshop. Then, like the way I had organized it, 6 people, 6 other actors would cover all of my costs. Anything above that was for my time, right? Because it was a lot of effort and time to organize these things. But that meant, like, if I had a workshop where I said that 12 to 14 people could come, not only was I also making a little something, it wasn't like I was charging a lot more. They were still really good prices for what it was. But if I had space, I could bring my son. So
Oh, great.
sometimes, and my
That's
son was
cool.
16, 17 years old. Yeah. So that was wild. So sometimes I would bring my son to these workshops. One thing is he grew up in studios, right? So he saw me like sitting in front of a microphone. He saw other adults sitting in front of a microphone. You make a mistake, right? And it's like, okay, start over. And there's no self-consciousness. You just do it, right? So he grew up seeing that. He also grew up with me as his mama, right? And I'm super intense about acting, and even like when he was a little kid, we would do acting games without calling it that. Like, for instance, like we would see a person, like one of them was the sneezing game, right? Because sneezes really gross me out. That's a little known fact about me. So we would do the sneezing game, and that was like, you'd see people around, right? It's sitting in a restaurant. It was like, how do you think he sneezes over there? Right? And then we would do these sneezes, and her. So it was doing all these different things, right? So like that, or even just like improv games where you're letting someone move you, right? And adjust you like a statue and things like that. Anyway, so he grew up being much less self-conscious than I was at his age. I was very self-conscious, but I think in this context, I mean, he was probably self-conscious in front of his other teenage friends, but in this context with adults, and he also was an only child, so he was very used to being around a lot of adults. So in this context, he was much freer. And I mean, I remember one time I had a Meisner instructor, and she called us together to do the exercise together. And my son and I were sitting across from each other. Now, are you familiar with Meisner? You know that?
I've heard of it, but
Yeah.
go ahead, tell the audience. Yeah.
It's basically you sit there and you don't say or do anything until you feel the impulse. And then whoever reacts to that needs to react to it. The beginning Meisner is a lot of repetition. It could be something as simple as, you have brown eyes. I have brown eyes. You have brown eyes. So I mean, it could be just going back and forth with that. So we were a couple of steps beyond that. So we were sort of having a conversation. And one of the things that my son was being standoffish. And I said, you're cold. And I get emotional even now thinking about it. And I said, you're cold. And I started to tear up, and he looked at me and he said, you're acting. Yes.
Ooh.
It's like the worst thing you can say to an actor. But nobody knows how to cut you like your kid.
Oh my God. That was good. You gave me the chills.
Yeah. And I immediately felt called out, even though I wasn't acting, but I immediately felt called out, and I started to laugh. And then I was trying to like get myself together. So I hit my leg, and I could see my son like sort of freaking out a little bit because it brought up so much in me. And then I was laughing because he was afraid. I could see his eyes going big, right? And I could see he had like opened this can of worms that he had no idea was a can of worms. And I was laughing at that. So my poor kid, he probably does need therapy with me, dragging him to these things. So yeah, so he kind of grew up with it. And I'm not sure why I went off on that tangent.
Well, what's so
But
interesting is like your kids bring out the real you. And the reason I did my podcast with my dad is because I felt like I could be myself around him.
Yeah.
And that is art. When you can truly be like unadulterated and be raw and vulnerable, you need to be around the people that can get you there. And
Yes.
kids, they call you on your BS.
Oh, God. Or even not. I mean, another time, I remember coming down the stairs, and this made its way into one of my screenplays because it was, nobody can cut you like your kid. And your kids aren't teenagers yet, are they?
I have a couple. My oldest is 15 and my daughter is getting ready to turn 13 this weekend. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you're in for a fun time. So I remember coming down the stairs and feeling good, right? I had done my makeup. I was dressed up nice. We were probably going somewhere. And I looked at my son. I said, "How do I look?" And he said, "Old."
Yikes.
And it was just so mean and so like, it's like somebody just throwing ice water on you because he knows that's the one. The kids just know how to cut you. They just do. And, I'm sure he probably doesn't even remember it, but it's like it's like in so many of my screenplays, you look old.
What did your parents think of your acting? Were they supportive?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I really have nothing beyond to say to that. Yeah, my dad would fly up when I was in theater productions and to see me. And so that was nice. And my mom always came to see me. My grandma did, my uncle. My uncle is extremely creative. He's probably literally without exaggeration, one of the best harmonica players in the world and could have had an amazing career with that. He did. He's on background on lots and lots of different things, but he kind of went off in different directions. But he is an amazing harmonica player and still does it. And I guess my grandmother had been an actress. I don't know whose contract she was under, but she had been an actress in Hollywood briefly. I don't know anymore about what exactly. I don't think she ever even did anything, but I know she was under contract briefly. So yeah, my parents were supportive and they are supportive.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Because, some people are like, oh, you can do that for a hobby, but, you can't make a living off of that.
Yeah. No, I don't ever remember either of my parents saying that to me, interestingly. Yeah. And I think also because they're entrepreneurs and I've always kind of figured things out, just kind of having that. I think everything is figure outable. It's not you can't do something. It's like, how can I do that? If it seems, I don't believe it's impossible. It's just I haven't figured it out yet. So I just need to figure it out.
I love at 47 that you're like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to invest in myself and figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't think most people do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you've invested in yourself?
Time, money, which all of it. The first year and a half of doing the coaching, right? Of bringing the coaches to Munich to get the training that I needed, the base that I needed to feel like my original training was kind of clicking back into place. So there's that. And of course, as an actor, we're always constantly investing. You have to get new headshots every couple of years. You have to update your reel. So you have to pay for someone to cut that unless you can do that yourself. And thank God now these days they want clips. So clips are not because you can add a little, like it could be a 60-second clip. Whereas before you had to find like the best 20, 30 seconds, 15 seconds of your show reel, whatever, right? Of whatever scene you did so that you could put it together with other things. And that's so difficult. You definitely need outside perspective on that to find out what you're showing, if what you're showing is really your best little snippet there. And, most people think they have to tell the whole story with their scenes, and you don't. Nobody cares what the story is about, what the scene is about. It doesn't need to make sense. It should just make enough sense so that you're not so confused that you're taken out of watching it. So we're investing in all of those. I'm still constantly taking workshops and, working on my craft and that, right? I'm always doing that. And I've also invested in coaches, like on the business end of it, like branding, a business coach, networking. I became a life and career coach myself. And it was originally to get over my own limiting beliefs because I knew I had them, from life. We all do, right? We wear these lenses and you can change the prescription of the lenses you're wearing, right? But it's going to take some work. It's not like you can just flip off the glasses and grab a new pair. You are going to see you're going to see and have expectations about things in your life based on things that have happened in your life, based on experiences that you've had. So for instance, this acting teacher was always telling us, you're not ready. You'll ruin it if they see you and you screw up your audition. You'll just get a bad name and there's all this stuff, right? So I think that was always kind of in my head, keeping me small, which is what he needed for us to continue to pay. So I knew I didn't want that. Fear is, we all have fear. It's not about having the fear. Everybody has fear. It doesn't go away. Courage is doing it anyway. Courage is not having the fear, right? Before I used to let my fear stand in front of me, be a bully, you get back in your place. And now I'm just like, you go over there. Go stand in the corner. I am doing this. And I don't care if I fall on my face. I'm doing it. And so it's that, right? Just knowing, I think also being prepared helps with fear. Like if you know, like, what's the worst that can happen? I might make a fool out of myself. I might totally fall flat. I might not get anywhere. Nobody will want me. I can't get an agent. Nobody will book me, right? All of this can happen. Well, if I've truly given it my all, then that's my answer. And maybe then I would reevaluate. So now what do I want to do? I love drawing. I love art. I'm sure I would have found, I love interior design. I would have found something so to fulfill me, because I'm just that kind of a person who's always looking for something creative like that. So yeah, it's really just about, I think we always have to invest in yourself. We are constant projects, hopefully, right? We're always evolving and learning and hopefully getting better as we progress through our lives, right?
I am interested though, like, have you ever fallen on your face? Have you ever like not been able to memorize the amount that you needed to memorize in like such a short period? Like what happens
Yeah.
when when that goes down?
Yes, but it wasn't because I wasn't able to. It was because I had an ego about it. So I thought, it's just a tiny little part, right? Couple of lines and easy to memorize when you're at home, when nobody's staring at you, waiting for something, or if they're doing what you expect them to do, but not so easy when all of a sudden pressure. The cameras are on you, the lights, this is your moment. Say it, fuck, blink, right? And that did happen to me once, luckily, many, 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 many years ago, but it mortified me so badly. And people had come like out of their trailers to watch me do my scene, like out of respect or whatever. I'm not even sure why, but I was like, what? And I just fucking fell flat on my face. And it was mortifying. And I thought, never again. I will never show up on set unprepared again. I am going to be 2000% prepared so that if nothing else, if nerves are getting in the way, that at least the repetition will kick in, right? Like flight attendants, they train for a crash landing. And all of a sudden that training just kicks in and you're just screaming out, doing all the things that you need to do. I was a flight attendant for a few years, so I know this, right? So all of a sudden you're just, yelling out, ditch, 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 or whatever, can put your head between your knees and, you're just yelling out these things that you have learned, that you've been trained in doing. And it's just so you sort of do it by rote. So at the very worst, luckily that has not happened to me, but I always thought after that one experience, at the very worst, I will at least just be doing it by rote. I'll be doing it. I'm not going to ever stand there like a deer in the headlights again.
I feel like it's your calling when even when you've had moments like that, you still want to do it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think also we have to give ourselves grace. We're so hard on ourselves. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, you messed up. Not good. Don't do it again, and just move on. Right? You can only beat yourself up so much. And then all of a sudden it's not serving you. If it helps you to be better, then by all means, beat yourself up a little bit. But if it is stopping you from being better, then stop.
How did your parents help you be better?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, no, I don't mean it as in, but
Like if you could thank them for getting something right, what would you say they got right?
Oh, my parents got a lot right. My parents were in some ways amazing and in other ways fallible human beings. I remember very clearly the day I saw my mom become a human being and not a mother. And I remember it with my dad too, actually. So for me, it was like I had always put my parents on a pedestal. They were like superheroes almost for me. And the day I realized that they were just people, right? It was not on the same day, but when I realized, she's just a woman. He's just a man. He's just doing the best he can. Those were revelatory for me. But what they did right, my dad, he really instilled, I would say if there's one thing that my dad instilled in me, it's keeping your promise. My parents divorced when I was very young. So I was only just about 2 years old when they got divorced. And back then it was in the 60s. It was very normal for the fathers to have to pay, but to sort of fade away. Like, especially if the mother remarried, which my mother did. But my dad refused to fade away. He called us every night. You could set a watch by him at 6 o'clock, and he would pick us up every Wednesday and take us for ice cream. And he picked us up every weekend, not every other weekend. So every weekend, he picked up these two little girls. My sister was a year younger than I am. So a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. My dad was older when I was born. He was 45, but he was still really, a super good looking guy and was capable of, like, he could have had a social life, but he chose to be a father. Yeah.
And you did too.
So I guess so. Yeah. A little bit. So that was something that my dad really showed me, like you do it. Like he would say, come hell or high water, this is going to happen.
What a good guy. That's very sweet. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, good and bad, right? He was just a man in the end. And we all have light and dark. We all have positive and negative. But I know my dad loved me and I know he did his best. And that's all you can expect from anyone, right?
I love
and
that.
Yeah. It's having the grace to forgive yourself and forgive the people you love when they've made mistakes. There may have been things that, and there were, things I definitely don't agree with that he did to me as a teenager. But I also understand he grew up in a different time, like in a very authoritarian time. My dad was born in 1921. And he used to always say, if I say jump, you don't say when, you say how high. And I was like, I am not doing that. I'm not doing that. He couldn't dominate me. So that was one. And I think at one point he tried to break me because
so?
he came from, he pressed charges against me for being incorrigible. Yeah.
Oh
so
my
that was a
God.
hard one. Yeah. And I probably was incorrigible to a certain extent. I was a difficult teenager. I will say that. I was a wild child. I was a difficult teenager, but I was not shooting up heroin in a back alley. I was very far away from that. I was going out and, drinking and smoking pot and doing things that people in my area, in my time, were doing.
Yeah.
But part of it, again, is he came from a different time and he just did not get that whole thing, like you're not a druggie just because you smoke a joint once in a while. There were a lot of things. My dad got remarried when I was about 10, 11, and he very clearly told us that his wife came before we did. So whereas we had always been his everything, all of a sudden he married this woman who I now love, but I also had a very complicated relationship with her, and told us, she comes first. She comes first. That was a hard pill to swallow. So I think that really messed with my head in a lot of ways. And my mom then was very much about, you come first. You are my everything, right? And both my parents loved very intensely, but they both had their own ways. My mom was 24 years younger than my dad. So I understand why that marriage didn't work, right? She was a baby when I was born. She was 21 when I was born. I mean, my God, think today, someone at 21 having a baby, right? It's crazy, but.
I wasn't ready at that age, for sure not.
Yeah, me neither. No way. And my mom defended me. My dad hired a lawyer to prosecute me, for being incorrigible. And my mother hired a lawyer to defend me. So there was that whole thing. And then my dad knew the judge and, it was kind of a messed up situation. And it was when the relationship was fairly, I don't know, his new wife's daughter was studying psychology at the time. And they had recommended, she had heard about this school, which was a school for difficult children. I don't even
know what incorrigible means, but that doesn't sound good.
I guess it means incorrigible. Yeah, that's a good question. What exactly does it mean? I think it means something along the lines of, like, you can't be fixed in a sense.
Like, I didn't even know that you could, like, press charges for that. Like, what?
Yeah, I didn't either. I found out in the hearing. I did not know because I had taken a car.
You're like, can you tell me what that means first?
Yeah. I had gone joyriding in my mom's best friend's car with her daughter. And my dad is the one who taught me how to drive. So I felt like I knew how to drive, but I was only 14 and I got pulled over. And so I was in trouble for that. So we show up, right? My dad takes me to this court hearing about driving without my driver's license. And the judge says, okay, so on the matter of blah, 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 driving without your driver's license, your license is suspended for 6 months. Boom. Now, on the matter of Alexander versus Alexander on the charge of, and I remember going, what? Dad. And he wouldn't look at me. He was just looking straight ahead. So I can still see him in profile. And I didn't know. I didn't understand. Nothing. It was like a huge shock. And I don't remember much, like something must have happened because my mom stepped in and hired a lawyer to defend me. And that went on for a couple of years. And then I ended up going to the school, DeSisto, which was a messed up school. But one of these days, I'm going to write a screenplay about it. It was like a school that was based on Gestalt therapy. And some of the states were subsidized states. So you had kids that had the choice of going to juvie or going to DeSisto. And other states were not subsidized. So you had extremely wealthy parents who were like, I don't know what to do with this kid. You take him. You take her. And so you had this mix right off the bat. And then on top of that, they had all these weird, it was like culty, right? So the man who ran it, I think he's dead now, was Michael DeSisto. We were allowed to smoke. We were allowed to swear.
I'm like, it sounds like a fun time.
Well, I mean, as all cults have their upside, right? But there were a lot of things like really big brotherish around it. Like you weren't, like we had these group therapy sessions a couple times a week. At each group therapy session, you had to rat out somebody in your dorm. So we would, yes, there were 4 levels getting through the school. So we called ourselves level 5, me and the other rebels, right? We called ourselves level 5. And we would say, so like, okay, Reena, I'm going to say I saw you drinking staff coffee and you say that you saw me, blah, 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 right? Walking across the septic field or something like that, because we weren't allowed to do these things. And so we would you had to turn somebody in for something. Another thing was if you were breaking rules, like when I first arrived, I had run away. This is what also started this. I wanted to live with my mom. So I had run away. I was living with my dad. I'd run away to go live with my mom. So when I arrived at the school, they said I was a runaway risk. So they did something that they called leashing, which meant, God. Well, it's not quite that bad. So they leashed me to this other girl in my dorm. And so that meant that she always had to be within an arm's distance of me. And it was her problem to be within this arm's distance. It was not my problem. So yeah. So 2 teenagers, I mean, it was insane, honestly.
You got to make friends with that person.
Well, I mean, I was brand new in this school and I did not want to be there.
Oh my God.
So it was like, I could give a shit, I mean, whatever. Now I'm going here. Oh, you're still here, right? It's like that. So then they had triple leashed me by the end of the day. So they had these 3 girls like following me around and all the time. And I liked my roommate. And for some reason, they decided that they weren't going to let me sleep in my room, that I had to sleep up the other dorm room with these 3 girls. And 2 of the girls, it was their room. And one of the girls came from another dorm room. So 2 of the girls were sleeping in the same bed together. And I was sleeping in another bed. And another girl had a mattress on the floor near the door. And they all knew each other. They'd been in boarding school together. So they were, it was like a slumber party. They were all laughing and giggling and having fun and, like girls do, right? When they're having a slumber party. And I was miserable, just, trying not to cry. And I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of them by crying. And it was like too much. And I got up because I felt I was going to start crying. And I opened the door to go to the bathroom. I wanted to get away from them. And I accidentally hit the girl who was lying with the door in the head. So now they're screaming, she's violent. And I'm not violent. But then everybody's like chasing after me. And then I was upstairs and I remember being on the payphone, tells you how long ago this was, calling my mom. And my mom had just picked up and I'm like, Mom, and they, take the phone out of my hand and hang it up. I run downstairs again and I go into my room, my original room. which had been decorated. My mom had flown up with me and had decorated my room for me, and with all my comforter and my stuff, right, that tried to make me feel safe. On the back of the door, and my roommate is laughing because she knows what's going on. She's been at this school for a while. And I just jump on my bed, and I had very long hair back then. And I just pulled up my knees, and my hair fell in front of my face. And all of a sudden, all these people are around me, and they're brushing my hair back, and they're saying, "You're really just a scared little girl, and you should just, if you want to cry, it's okay." And, doing all this. And it was just like, it was like culture shock is what it was. But then you get used to that. My mom brought me up to the school. So as we were walking from the admissions to the dorm, it was quiet. I don't know if people were in class or what it was. And it's beautiful. It was in Massachusetts, in Stockbridge, this tiny little town, really idyllic at the base of this mountain with a lake. It was beautiful. It's a pretty place. So we're walking on this campus and nobody's around. And I'm miserable. And my mom is sad because she hasn't been able to keep me out of the school. And all of a sudden we hear this blood-curdling scream. And I look at my mom looks at me, right? We're just like, and this girl comes tearing across the field. And then about 2 seconds later, this group of people come tearing from behind her, chasing her. And they catch up to her, they tackle her, they put her down on the ground. She's like spread eagle on the ground. And one girl is at her head, and she's got her head between her knees. And everybody else is on an arm, a leg, right? Everybody's got a limb. And they're saying to her, they're trying to calm her down, but they're saying, "Let it out, let it out." And she's like these primal screams.
Oh my God.
Yes. And I just looked at my mom. My mom looked at me. And it's like, what do you do? Right? You just keep going. I mean, now it's,
You're like, get me out of here.
yeah. But I had been court ordered.
For how long?
Well, it was indefinite but I ended up running away.
Oh my
So that
God.
was kind of that.
But you were ordered to be there like all through the rest of high school, or?
I don't know what they decided, but I was definitely to be there for freshman year. I don't know
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But you got away?
Yeah. I think we were the first ones to get away, because I think my mother, if I remember this correctly, was the first one where it wasn't both parents on board with the kid being in the school.
Nice.
But because my dad was paying for it, he was the one who had the say. I kept hearing about this girl, Mara. And Mara had been at the school and then was away and now apparently was coming back. And her parents, she was 15, almost 15, something like that. But her parents were giving her up for adoption. And the owner of the school, Michael DeSisto, was taking her guardianship. So she was going to be a student at the school under his guardianship. I don't know if that meant her parents were still paying for it, but I was so fascinated with her story because as many problems as I had with my dad, I knew he would never give me up. At least I never thought you know what I mean? I mean, it just was like, what? How do you give up how do you put your 15-year-old child up for adoption? What is that? And so I was so, I think, empathetically connected to her before she even showed up. And then she showed up and she was beautiful. So there was that on top of it, right? So I thought, oh my God, she's so pretty and her parents don't want her and poor girl and, all this. So when it was summer vacation had come up, and my best friend at the time was this girl named Julie. And her dad was an ambassador in Switzerland. And she had invited me to come home with her for the summer because my dad had said I couldn't go to my mom, which is where I wanted to go. And obviously I didn't want to go to him. And he didn't want me either. So he was like, go home with a friend, And so that when I told Julie that, she's like, yeah, I'll ask my dad. And so she did. And they said, yeah. So I tell my dad, and he's like, are you out of your fucking mind? Do you think I'm going to send you to Switzerland? No, that's not happening. So now it's a couple of days later and pretty much everybody's gone, right? So it's me and Mara, and I think maybe one other girl was in our dorm who didn't have a place to go for the summer. And I walked outside. We were allowed to smoke, as I said, we were allowed to smoke, but you couldn't smoke in the dorm. You had to go outside to do it. So I go out, yeah, rules are rules,
No problem.
So I go outside to have a cigarette and Mara's outside smoking. So it was the first time we had talked, and we were 14 and 15, or she was just a little bit older than I was. But I remember like, not knowing what to say to awkward teenagers, right? Smoking, thinking they're super cool. And I was like, have you ever been to California? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, how was it? She was like, it was great. And then there was kind of like this pause again. I said, do you want to go again? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, I'll meet you down here in 10 minutes. And that was that. And we left. And that whole thing was a film like waiting
Oh
to
my
happen in
God, that's
itself.
freaking awesome. Did you all make it there?
We did.
No.
We did. We hitchhiked to California with $10 between us. Yeah.
Oh
And
my
I
God,
think,
you guys are lucky you didn't get like
oh,
killed.
yes, we are so lucky. I mean, I think the saving grace
God.
was we were at that age when you're like between a girl and a woman. And I think we were just on the safe side of girl. So most people were decent. Not all. We did have some run-ins, but nothing bad ever really happened. But it could have. As a grown woman now, right? It's like, oh my God, I don't know
Had
how
you
my mother
ever
lived through
hitchhiked
that.
before?
My dad had picked up hitchhikers. It was the 70s. You can't forget that,
It was
right? I
so
grew up
much
in the
safer. I mean, I
Yeah.
even did it in my teen years.
Yeah, people did. It just wasn't, I don't know if the monsters weren't out like they are today or what it was, but it wasn't considered the unsafe thing. It was like a viable option. People would hitchhike to college and hitchhike home from college, and you'd hitchhike to a party. It was a viable option.
Okay, what happened when you got to California? I'm dying. I cannot believe you pulled that off.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing, right? So first of all, we're standing out there at 4 or 5 in the morning. And every time headlights come towards us, Mara dives into the bushes because she thinks that it's the school coming to get us, because this is what they do, right? They get the van and they come and get you. And finally, after her like doing this 3 or 4 times, I was like, Mara, either they're going to find us or they're not, but we're going to be still standing here if we don't get a ride. So then this kid pulls up in a van and we get in. He's a paper boy. He's doing this paper route. So we get in the van and he's like, what's going on? And so we say, we're hitchhiking home from college. And he's like, cool. Want to smoke a doobie? So we're like, yeah. So he sparks that up. So he's doing his route and throwing his papers, and it's country, right? It's like the middle of nowhere kind of a thing. He pulls back into DeSisto, the school. Mara hits the floor of the van and he's like, what's wrong? And she's like, I lost my contact. She's like looking for a contact. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat. It wasn't a van with seats. It just was open, right? With all the newspapers around. So she's down on the floor and he pulls right up to Michael DeSisto's house. And we are just like, freaking out, right? And throws his newspaper, gets back in. He's like, cool, where should I drop you guys? And so we're like, oh, okay, the turnpike. So he takes us to the turnpike and we get a ride. And a few days into it, I call my mom, and I think I was in Kansas by the time I called her. So she was like, look, I know you well enough not to tell you to come home or to go back to school, but please, for God's sake, call me every day so I know you're alive. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Oh my
and
God.
she also had given me her credit card number and all of that. And she's like, and if you need it, use it. If you're hungry, if you need a place to sleep, I want you to use this. So that was amazing. But back then as well, in the 70s, the truckers all had expense accounts. So it was no skin off their nose. They weren't paying for us. They had these expense accounts. They were buying us meals, and we were also sleeping. They have those sleeping compartments in the back there. So my mom and my grandmother and all of my mom's friends, my grandmother's friends, they were trying to find us places to stay. But there was, people only had answering machines back then, if that. So by the time we would get somewhere and they had found someone and gotten a hold of them and they had called them back and they had told them what was going on, we were already moving on. So, because the truckers all had CBs and they were like, got these 2 girls, they're going to California, who can pick them up? So we never even, I think we stuck our thumb out that one time and that was it. Maybe once more. But for the most part, that was, the truckers were like CBing us, from one ride to the next.
Wow.
Yeah.
An adventure. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. So we got to San Francisco and then we hitchhiked down the coast, ended up in La Jolla. By this time, my grandmother had gotten a hold of a friend of hers and they had arranged these 2 by all means, delinquent girls to go stay with my grandma's friend. I just think
Yes.
about the generosity of this woman to let us into her home the way she did. And we did. It was La Jolla, California, a nice place to visit, definitely. And we were doing like all the touristy stuff. We were going to the zoo and we were, we were kids, right? And we weren't bad kids. We were just willful kids. So you could think we were delinquent because of all these things that had happened, but we weren't, right? Otherwise, we would have been stealing from her and bringing guys into her home. We were just kind of like enjoying the beach. California, cool, And after about 3 weeks, and I mean, even that, 3 weeks to have 2 teenage kids in your home and feed them and, all of it, just the generosity of this woman. And my mom said, okay, it's been 3 weeks. What's the plan? I want you to come home. And I said, yeah, I know, but I can't leave Mara. And my mom said, yeah, I know. Yeah. So there are 2 tickets at the airport.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. So then we went. My mom took over Mara's guardianship and Mara lived with us for a couple of years. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, her dad didn't want her. The school wasn't having her back.
God.
And so like the depths, of love and of like, this is what I'm going to do for you, right? I'm going to bring this girl who I have no idea who she is and what she is and anything. Her parents didn't want her, whatever, right? I'm going to do this for you.
Oh my
And
God. That's
she,
tremendous.
it is. It really is. And so that was amazing, right? To talk about feeling like, I really did feel always that I was my mom's everything. And so that was a gift until I didn't, right? Until she, right? Because she was also a woman who had her own desires. And, it was around the same time it was with me and my son as well, where I was like, okay, now I want this. I've been there for you, but my mother moved out. So it was a little different. But in the end, parents are just people, right? And they're just trying to do their best. And I really feel like both of my parents, in spite of everything, were just doing what they thought was going to be the solution to whatever problem or dilemma they were facing at the time. I've talked about it, with my dad many times as an adult,
That's incredible that you were able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad and I could always talk. That was something I really miss about my dad because my dad and I could always talk about everything. And my dad was really curious, interested in the world, and frankly, for the man of his generation, very open-minded. We always could talk. And we had a long time of having a very complicated relationship. But when I had my son, I reached out to him again and we repaired it. And you can't really repair things if you're not willing to talk about them. He said, I don't know if I made the right decisions, but it is what it is.
I love that he questioned that though.
Yeah, he did. I know he questioned that with me. And I think the reason my dad fought so fiercely for us when my mother left him was because he had been married once before. And his first wife, he had 2 kids with his first wife, and she had talked him into giving his children up for adoption, which is what people did back then in the 50s.
Wow.
The wife would get married and the new husband would take on these children and the children would take the new husband's name because that's just how it was done back then. And I know it was something that my father always regretted and really struggled with. And he tried to have a relationship with the daughter, but it never really, and the son would never have anything to do with him again. And on the one hand, I get it. I get it from all sides, right? I get the kids and their reactions. I get it. One of the things I always wanted my dad to do was to reach out to them and tell them that it was a mistake, that, that he regretted because he did. And I think what I tried to say to him was, it's not about you, Dad. It's about setting them free, right?
Wow. Giving them
right?
that.
Giving them that. So just telling them that that was one of the biggest mistakes in my life was not fighting harder for you. But I think that's why he fought so hard for us, for my sister and I.
Wow.
So
That's a
people
deep
have their
realization.
stories.
Oh my God. That is
Yeah.
a deep realization.
Yeah. I'm an actor, human nature and why people do things. It fascinates me. Right. And maybe if that hadn't have happened, he wouldn't have fought so hard for us because he would have been like, I have 2 kids. Let me just let this go. But he didn't. And yeah, in the end, I was really happy to have been able to repair that rift, and in the end, like whereas my mom sort of let me down. I was very sick. Man, this is going on and on. I don't know. You tell me if we need to stop.
I'm
But I
here
was
for
very
it.
sick after my son was born and almost died.
Oh my
And
God.
my dad came to Germany and stayed with me for 3 months, in the hospital. I was in the hospital, and he didn't leave until I was out of mortal danger. And my mom never came. And it caused 18 years of like, I never stopped talking to my mom because I always believe that to carry that anger and resentment is more damaging to me than it is to her, but it definitely changed our relationship. I had really been a mama's girl and, very close with my mother. And I was like, I just don't get it. How could you not have come? How could you not have come? I needed you. And we fixed that too 18 years later, recently,
Wow.
actually. Yeah, we fixed that. But with my dad, for me, I didn't agree with everything he did when I was a teenager, but he definitely was there for me when I needed him as an adult. And he made sure that I was okay. And he was very much there for me. And that also really changed our relationship and turned the shoe for a bit on my relationship with my mom. So in my life, I've had the joy and the pain of having both of my parents be utterly there for me and also really leaving me in the lurch. But what I learned from it is we're just human beings. We're all just doing our best. And as long as you try and do your best and it's done with love, I think it's almost anything is forgivable. I mean, certain things aren't, obviously, but I think almost anything is forgivable. And with my mom in this instance, she didn't come because my dad was there and she didn't feel like she could set aside her whatever with my dad. And even still, I mean, I don't get that because if I were divorced from my husband and we had an acrimonious relationship, I don't care. So don't visit at the same time he's there, right? But nothing would keep me from my son, God forbid, my son's bedside. Nothing, nothing, nothing and no one. And so that was where I really just couldn't get it. I just didn't get it until I realized my mom is just not as strong as I always thought she was. And that's not her fault. She's just not as strong as I wanted her to be. But it doesn't, I know she loves me. She was just more afraid, I think, of the situation and couldn't deal with it. That was how she dealt with it.
I love
And
that you've been able to forgive them both. I mean, my God, that is a lot of work on your part.
yeah, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm a very optimistic person generally. It doesn't mean I forget. I mean, I did have it with me for 18 years. And I would bring it up occasionally with my mom, and we would get into arguments really about it. And the most she ever would say was, I'm sorry you feel that way, which is, not okay.
And I'm not going to go there.
No,
Yeah.
right. But, the more I became an adult myself, right? And the more I'm not so tied to her anything, right? She's my mom and I choose to have a relationship with her because I love her. I don't have to agree and I don't have to acquiesce and I don't have to say that she's right because she's my mom. I'm a full grown woman and that is not how I would have done it. And I think I'm right, right? And so it wasn't until very recently I was, traveling through. I always, whenever I'm in the States, I travel through Chicago so I can stop and see my mom. So I was traveling through and we got to talking. And as you can see, I'm an emotional person, right? So my mom is not a crier, not at all. But I was saying to her, Mom, she's like, yeah, but everything was under control. Your dad was there, your sister was there, your husband was there. Everybody was, you didn't need me there. I just would have. And it was like, yes, I needed you. You're my mom, right? You don't ever not need your mom in a situation like that. So, okay, I survived, but the doctors were telling everyone I had a 5 to 10% chance to live.
Oh my God.
So the odds were I was not going to survive. So why not do everything possible to, I don't know. And just being a mother myself, there's, as I said, there's just nothing that would keep me from that. But in the end, I just think we're all fallible. And that's what really fascinates me about humans and being an actor and the beauty of being a human being and not being perfect and making mistakes and trying to do your best. And these are the stories you asked me earlier what the themes are, right? The things that interest me are the times when people try and do their best and are pulled away from that by whatever. by egotism, by selfishness, by thinking that something else is maybe better. We're all just trying to do our best. I think good people are, right? Most people. And what is a good person, right? We can go into that too, because I think nobody is 100% anything. We all have many facets, right? We're like this many faceted diamond. It just kind of depends what catches the light, how your life treats you, what you learn, what you see, what you feel, how you're treated. All of these things shape us and are carving things into our diamond.
That's so
And
beautiful. I love
yeah,
that.
and it's also what you choose. Put the light on. And I don't choose the darkness. I choose the light.
Thank you for bringing the boldness. You definitely did.
I am an emotional person, so it does come up. It's not sadness, tears. It's just, whenever I have an overflow, it just comes out of my eyes. So
I love
it can be.
Wow. That's very powerful. I want to know what happened to Maura.
She died. Yeah. She never got it together. So she just sort of spiraled out and ended up ODing.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. We had been out of touch for a while when that happened. She died the year my son was born.
Whoa.
So 1997. Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It was a waste. But she was one of those people couldn't get out of her own way, She couldn't actually take a helping hand. I don't know. I mean, she definitely wrestled with her demons. I don't know. We were kids. I did have a relationship with her as a young woman, but she was just in a dark place even then. And it scared me, to be honest. I wish I could have been there more for her, but it scared me. She was doing a lot of drugs and hanging out with somebody who, a lot of bad vibes from him and going down. It wasn't the life I wanted. And it scared me to be a part of that. And so I distanced myself from her. I tried to help her get away from him, and she didn't want to. She ended up going back to him. I helped her, right? We got her an apartment and this and that. And then she went back to him again. And then I was just kind of like, I'm here, but I can't. So if you need me, I'm here. If you want to come out of this, I'm here. But I can't be a part of this. And yeah. So yeah.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
That could definitely be a movie, that whole chapter.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
Work on that screenplay.
Yeah. Just how to tell it, right? But yeah.
You tell it pretty good from the heart. Wow. Is there anything that
Yeah.
you would like to ask my dad? He's going to have a lot to reflect on with this episode.
Maybe with a glass of wine. What does your dad do?
He ran a manufacturing company with his parents for 40 years, and now he works with people that used to work for him, and he's kind of like a
Wow.
consultant. So he helps
Okay.
them with their
Yeah.
sales process, and he's an entrepreneur.
Fantastic. Our conversation has been so heartfelt. What do you think hearing my story would be a good question to ask your dad?
Well, actually, in hearing that story that you told, I was thinking about my teenage years, and like I literally drove around in cars with people that did not have license. I mean, that I feel like
Yeah, it
is a
was normal.
common
It was
occur.
normal. It was
And
totally normal.
I also hitchhiked all the way from Israel to Egypt, which obviously would not be safe now. And I was
Right.
in my teen years when I did that. And I had a friend that hid in the bushes, and I'd, wave the person down, and then he would come out. So he was like, they're going to stop for you. They're not going to stop for me. So when you were telling that story, I was just like, wow, I've done those things. I don't know if my dad knows all of that, but
He will now.
he will now. And it's just crazy how one decision can just shape your life.
Yeah. It's a
That's
chain
what I was
reaction.
thinking.
I
Like
think
my life could have been
life.
different in so many decisions that I have made.
Yeah,
And
of
I think
course.
about that a lot. And everyone's life, right? Like I rode in the back of a truck tripping on acid in West Virginia, going 70 miles an hour. Like, what if that truck would have stopped? Me and my girlfriend could have flew over the truck.
For sure. Oh my God.
Like crazy things
Absolutely.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I mean, I think being like, growing up the way I did, and my mom was super liberal, my dad was super conservative, but trying to be open-minded and, and all of that.
I mean, the
I
one
guess
thing that comes up for me now is like, I feel a lot more protective of my children from having so much freedom. Has it changed the way you parented?
It did. Yeah. I mean, my son, he got to be a handful at one point, but by the time he was actually a handful, he was actually an adult. He was 18, 19 years old. And a handful, he was never to the extent that I was a handful, right? He did run away once. He went to Berlin, but I knew where he was and I knew who he was staying with. So I don't know if that's running away, but he was like, this is where I am. And I was like, you come home now. And he's like, no, not going to do it. I'm here. I'm having fun, right? And so then I called the police, right? And I was like, my son, he's only 17, and they're like, he's how old? 17. It's like, go get him. I know where he is. I know the address and everything. They're like, no, he's 17. It's, figure it out. But the kid he was staying with was in his 20s. So I threatened, and I did. I said, my son is a minor and you are not. You better put him on a bus back home. Unless you want, this mother's vengeance coming down on you. So yeah. But in a lot of ways, I was also very liberal with my son because my parents were liberal with me in a lot of ways, right? My mom grew pot for me. Both of my parents let us drink. It was never, so I never had that crazy thing of like, woohoo, alcohol. It was like, yeah, alcohol, right? I've been taking a sip of whatever my parents had since I was old enough to ask for it if I wanted it. And
I
mostly
did that
didn't because
too.
it didn't taste good, right?
Yeah.
So whatever. So, and plus it's Europe, right? So my son grew up with that. So they're just much more liberal about wine and beer anyway. So it's legal to drink here at 16. So there's that as well. So yeah, I think in some ways it was much more protected, but it was also a different world, right? This world that my son has grown up in we know it's not as safe, right? So back then, maybe it wasn't as safe, but we didn't know it. Although I have to say, my dad did practice with us. I was recently reminded of this. He used to practice with us what to do if a stranger told us, hey, girls, come here. I got a puppy to show you. Or, another one was he'd roll up in his car and he was like, I'm a stranger now. Hey, quick, your dad's in the hospital. Come on, I'm going to take you there. He would practice these scenarios with us. And I even knew what to do if someone grabbed me. I was to scream as loud as I could. He's not my dad. He's not my dad. Help, fire. So,
Yeah, that's smart.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I taught that to my son, right? And so something in my dad's mind knew even back then that people were monsters and could do horrible things. But yeah, I don't know.
I'm glad that you didn't come across any monsters.
Yeah, not really. I mean, we had some run-ins, but the one was a drunken idiots. And then the other one was he tried. Nothing ever happened. And again, I really do think that we were saved by being more on the side of girls than we were. We looked more like girls than we did like women. And we weren't wearing makeup. We weren't wearing heels. We were wearing jeans and had backpacks. We looked like girls. When I look back, when you look at a 14-year-old, as an adult, that's a child. And I think most people saw us that way. Just a couple of perverts, but nothing happened, as I say. Could have, but it didn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a story.
Yeah. Told ya.
I love it. How can people connect with you?
Instagram, Ann Alexander Cedar, Sieder. I also have a podcast. It's called Act Bold. It's on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all the usual places. But my podcast, if you're not into acting, is probably not going to be for you. If you're into acting in film, then give it a listen. I think you'll find it good.
Well, you can definitely learn even if you aren't an actor because you're asking all of the questions that you yourself wanted to learn. So I love that.
Yes, that's true. That is true. And honestly, I think so much of what I talk about can be applied to so many different things. But, it is done from the angle of being an actor, talking to people who are also in the film industry. So
Thank you, Ann.
This has been amazing. Thank you, Reena.
You've heard from my mom. Now, let's switch it over to Grandpa.
This is an episode with Ann, and she gives you quite an insight into growing up with a mixture of what fatherhood and motherhood are really about. She decides that when she's going to have a child, to really dedicate her life to really the growing up of a child after the experience of her father that really was involved with another woman. This was his second marriage, where he actually signed off his two children. And then he has two children with Ann's mom, and that relationship doesn't pan out. And where she wants to do the same thing, maybe limit his time with the children. And he's decided that the first time was a mistake, that he's going to go beyond every measure possible able to have that connection with Anne and her sister, and the difficulties of multi-families, the difficulty with different fathers and mothers, and then getting remarried with new families, as we've even seen in our own family, is quite an upheaval for the children. So for her to then want to dedicate time with her son to try to give him every opportunity to have some stability in his life means that she was putting him first beyond her own relationship and beyond even herself, which is, as you know, on the Better Call Daddy show, is part of the legacy of what parents are supposed to do. It's not supposed to just be about them. It's supposed to be about a legacy of future and carrying on the mantle to your children and your children's children. We didn't set that up. The way we believe from the Torah, and we say it on the Shemona Esrei every day, Abraham, it's Isaac, it's Jacob, where we look at things in a generational mode. It's so easy to think sometimes just of our own selves and not understand that it's the bigger picture of why we exist. At least that's my opinion, obviously. And I think there was other people that would concur with that. But after finding out that even dedicating all your time and trying to do the right things for children, things can still go wrong and things aren't perfect because we're human. And you know what's funny about being a parent, when you sign up on day one, there's no time limit. It's a full-time job the rest of your life. And there's redeeming characters in this story as well, where even with fallouts and big upheavals, that you still have an opportunity to mend and blend and forgive, not necessarily forget, but to mix, blend, and hopefully figure out a more positive result that can occur if we continue to try to do the right things. I think that it's given Anne a lot of fortitude to be able to progress and continue and reach out for her own dreams too. She's back at her own profession. She seems to be able to roll with the punches with whatever's thrown at her. And sometimes it's that hard adversities that you face your whole life that gives you that strength. It's not to necessarily weigh you down, but to build you up and make you stronger.
I love that she's hired people who she admires their work, and she flew them internationally and created get-togethers where she could be trained by the best and reinvented herself after being a mom. And she says that you can live your dreams at any age. I love that message.
Well, I think that's true. And there's plenty of examples of people that have been entrepreneurs late in life after they've really experienced many jobs and hardships, but learned and developed skills, were able to then be utilized later in life, and where they have a chance to see all the failures of others and failures of themselves and looking at it as just as a learning experience and not where they want to put themselves down. It's two psychological points of view here. One, when you're knocked down and you're knocked down, you figure you can never get through the ceiling. You're always going to be down, to keep your expectations very low because achieving great things is not possible. And then other people flip the coin over and they say, well, I've seen all of the lows, I've seen all the hardships, and I've learned from it. And I know that if I persevere, that I can overcome anything and that there is no ceiling. I can fly as high as I want to fly. I just have to make sure I have the tools and the people around me to help propel me to the future. You know, that old saying, is the glass half full or is it half empty? And it depends on your attitude of which one you choose.
I like it. Thanks for listening. Now I think I'm going to go call my dad.
I'll say goodbye and see you the next time.
Thanks for listening to the Better Call Daddy Show. Join us weekly for new episodes and more daddy wisdom.
Better Call Daddy is good advice always.
And love you, Grandpa, and love you, Mommy.
That's so cute. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You can also find special episodes on my YouTube channel, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Alexa,
On Good Pods.
or your preferred podcatcher. That's a wrap for now.